patrons and subscribers, and all you quiet people sitting in the back. This is Random Rob. Welcome back to the new show. I hope you're hungry for some horror film analysis, because today we're talking about Bob Balaban's 1989 suburban cannibal film, Parents. And I'm going to tell you 5 things I think you should know about this unique film. So, a little background. As the slasher film craze of the early 80s began to die down, and the decade was coming to a close, studios, directors, and writers were looking for fresh takes on the horror genre. And it was during this period that screenwriter Chris Hawthorne started to pour his childhood fears into a script for a film called Parents, that an assistant would end up handing to Bob Balaban as he was getting aboard a flight across the country. Balaban had been looking for a screenwriter to tweak a project he had been working on, but after reading Parents, he got off the flight and called Chris Hawthorne and said, "I want to make this movie." Although the project originally had a more modern setting, Balaban saw it as an opportunity to do a retro 1950s piece. And in scouting locations in Toronto, found an entire neighborhood of houses that had all been built in 1958. Veteran comedic actor Randy Quaid played the role of Nick Lemley. Mary Beth Hurt would play his wife Lily. And unknown child actor Brian Medorsky would play the central role of Michael Lemley, the quiet little boy who suspects something might be terribly wrong with his very normal-seeming parents. I just gave the Blu-ray a fresh rewatch, as well as some of the related interviews. And here are my 5 things you should know about Parents. Number 1, it's not a comedy. Vestron Pictures did not know how to market Parents. Horror comedies were becoming a breakout genre in the mid to late 80s. Having an actor like Randy Quaid attached to a lead role in such a film probably gave critics and audiences the expectation that Parents was going to be some dark, tongue-in-cheek film about suburban cannibals with some crazy sight gags. As it turned out, Parents was none of those things. And the film polarized critics on its release. It came and went in theaters in North America very quickly, but did do well in Canada. Number 2, the child as an outsider POV. Having a child as the main character and showing the world from his point of view was certainly nothing new. The difference with Parents is that rather than being a wisecracking narrator or a child with special knowledge or special powers within the story to affect change, Michael Lemley's viewpoint in Parents is one of the viewpoint of powerlessness. He's always at the edge of the frame looking in, or being looked down upon by the other characters. Nearly every shot in this film is done from a low angle, and this constant visual reinforcement makes the viewer feel small and powerless as well. Number 3, Parents feels like an homage to David Lynch, from its psychedelic-tinged montages to its soundtrack that alternates between eerie industrial drones and 50s cha-cha music, to the dialogue deliveries that seem to drag on just a little longer than they should, creating that sense of tension and seemingly ordinary banter. Almost all of it feels like a love letter to David Lynch. And I have a feeling if David Lynch had made this movie, it would probably be remembered better. Number 4, Randy Quaid's magnum opus. I guess it can be hard to disambiguate Randy Quaid's career from what he became in more recent years. And I myself don't really understand the pathology of what happened to him. But for this video, I just want to say, this is my favorite Randy Quaid performance, and in the character of Nick Lemley, creates this wonderful contrasting mix of suburban affability with brooding menace. And as I mentioned earlier, never comes off as funny. He only comes off as frightening in this film. Whether or not it presaged what would happen in his own life later, who's to say? At any rate, to me, it's his best work. And number 5, Meat as a metaphor for family secrets. Parents doesn't really work as a horror comedy. Some critics and audiences would argue Parents does not work as a horror film either, because if you had gone into this film and seen it teased as a horror comedy about suburban cannibals, you would watch it and say, well, where's the surprise? It's made obvious from the get-go that there is something not quite right with the Laemmles, and that the nightmares Michael has throughout the film are an ominous prescience about what he is going to find out about them. But there's another way to look at this film, and that is to look at it as a character study about abuse, disassociation, and as a child feeling that you are less than nothing because of those things in your life. Screenwriter Chris Hawthorne has stated in interviews that what he was really writing about when he wrote Parents was his father's alcoholism and the abuse and neglect that comes with that. Bob Balaban said in interviews that he was drawn to the story because he lived in a family where the veneer of normalcy overrode any sort of investigations into the problems that his family had, and that he wouldn't find out dark secrets about his family until he was in his 30s. That's something I can personally relate to. My parents got divorced when I was very little, and as a child, it was hard for me not to notice that no one in my family ever talked about my father. The reason they didn't was because he was an alcoholic, he was bipolar, and he made life impossible for people around him. And when you grow up in a circumstance like that and you don't know, as a child, your imagination fills it in. You start to wonder if that parent was a bad person. You wonder if that makes you a bad person. You wonder if other people can see it when they look at you, that even strangers can tell something negative about you that you yourself don't know. And I'm sorry to get touchy-feely on that point, but I bring it up because that is what the movie Parents crystallizes and portrays, as well as touching on the more obvious themes about eating meat. Where does meat come from? How is it made? This is also something, as children, we often have to take for granted because the truth of it isn't pretty. And I'm not saying that as making a political stand for veganism or vegetarianism, just saying it is a truth of our lives that's usually not discussed. And I think it's really these themes that pissed people off when they saw Parents. Not simply that our families have skeletons in the closet, but that the repression of talking about those things is an institution in itself, and that these institutions are passed along. As a metaphor for those subjects, I'd call Parents a brilliant film, just not a horror comedy. And some other trivia I wanted to mention. This film has some great performances by veteran actress Sandy Dennis as the school counselor Millie Dew, and an unforgettable little character part by young actress London Juno as Michael's quirky girlfriend Juno Mills Cockell. And if you're interested in the film, there's also a really good interview with Bob Balaban on YouTube. It's under the Film at Lincoln Center series. I believe the video is just called Parents Q&A. Balaban relates some funny anecdotes in his typical dry manner about the making of the film. But near the end of the interview, he gets into talking about working on Altered States and about director Ken Russell. If you're interested in that film at all, watch the end of that interview. His comments are hilarious. So what are some of your favorite horror comedies that aren't really comedies? Let me know in the comments below. And if you liked what you heard, please press the like button and subscribe, and consider becoming a patron of the new show. I could use your help. Alright, this is Random Rob for the new show, signing off. I'll see you next time. The new show is made possible by generous support from viewers like Tony, Luz, Arnell, Skipnick, Christopher, Marion, Eric, and B. Thank you so much for your support.